Shalom.
Okay, so we're going to start going through the Nazarene Acts of the Apostles. This is a lengthy work. It's over 300 pages long. It's pretty detailed and pretty lengthy, so we're going to just kind of jump right into it. It says, I, Clement, who was born in the city of Rome, was from my earliest age a lover of chastity, while the bend of my mind held me bound as with chains of anxiety and sorrow. For a thought that was in me, whence originating I cannot tell, constantly led me to think of my condition of mortality, and to discuss such questions as these: whether there be for me any life after death, or whether I am to be wholly annihilated, whether I did not exist before I was born, and whether there will be no remembrance of this life after death. And so the boundlessness of time will consign all things to oblivion and silence, so that not only will we cease to be, but there will be no remembrance that we have ever been. This also revolved in my mind. When the world was made, or what was before it was made, or whether it has existed from eternity. For it seems certain that if it had been made, it must have been doomed to dissolution, and if it be dissolved, what is to be afterwards, unless it may be that all things will be buried in oblivion and silence, or something will be which the mind of man cannot now conceive. So basically, Clement is kind of having, he's pondering the meaning of life and whether there's life after death. He's raised in pagan Rome. He's just very high up in this Roman society. He was an aristocrat, so he's wondering about these different theories about what happens after you die and whether you're immortal or whether the soul dies, that kind of thing. He says, while I was continually revolving in my mind these and such like questions, suggested I know not how, I was pining away wonderfully through excess of grief. And what was worse, if at any time I thought to cast aside such cares, as being of little use, the waves of anxiety rose all the higher upon me. For I had in me that most excellent companion, who would not suffer me to rest, the desire of immortality. For, as the subsequent issue showed, and the favor of Almighty Yahuwah directed, this bend in my mind led me to the quest of truth and the acknowledgment of the true light. And hence it came to pass that ere long I pity those whom formerly in ignorance I believed to be blessed. So, he's saying here that this desire was driving him to seek out higher truth, and he's of course crediting that to the Creator, pushing him forward with this issue. Chapter 3, he says, having therefore such a bend of mind from my earliest years, a desire of learning something led me to frequent the schools of the philosophers. There I saw that naught else was done, save the doctrines were asserted and controverted without end. Contests were waged, and the arts of syllogisms and subtleties of conclusions were discussed. If at any time the doctrine of the immortality of the spirit prevailed, I was thankful, and if any time it was impugned, I went away sorrowful. Still, neither the doctrine had the power of truth over my heart. This only I understood, that opinions and definitions of things were accounted true or false, not in accordance with their nature and the truth of the arguments, but in proportion to the talents of those who supported them. And I was all the more tortured in the bottom of my heart, because I was neither able to lay hold of any of those things that were spoken as firmly established, nor was I able to lay aside the desire of inquiry. But the more I endeavored to neglect and despise them, so much the more eagerly, as I have said, did a desire of this sort creeping upon me secretly, as with a kind of pleasure, taking possession of my heart and mind. So he's going to these schools of the philosophers, and what he's seeing is just endless debates, and that the opinions were not settled based upon whether they were true or false, but they were settled based upon who gave the best argument. Whoever was the best debater. Now, this is one of the things that was very important back in Greco-Roman society at this time was the schools of rhetoric. And so part of a classical education in Greco-Roman society involved going into these rhetorical schools, and they were taught how to argue, how to speak publicly, and to persuade your audience to take your side over the other person's. This was a very important part of their society. So, Clement is realizing that you're not really discovering the truth. Like if you're arguing and debating something based on who gives the best argument, then truth is kind of set aside. And so he is unhappy with this. He's wanting the truth. He's not wanting to just follow whoever has the most convincing argument. And this is a theme that we're going to see repeated throughout the opening chapters of this book. That there is this piece of literature, the author's trying to draw a distinction between someone who is able to teach the truth and teach it simply versus someone who's got a very complex argument. And so this is almost like an antithesis to the Greco-Roman rhetorical method. Chapter 4 says, "Being therefore distressed in the discovery of things, I said to myself, why do we labor in vain, since the end of things is manifest? For if after death I will be no more, my present torture is useless. But if there is to be for me a life after death, let us keep for that life the excitements that belong to it, lest it be that some sadder things befall me than those that I now suffer, unless I will have lived obediently and soberly, and according to the opinions of some of the philosophers, I be consigned to the stream of dark rolling Phlegetheron, or to Tartarus like Sisyphus and Tydeus, and to ageless punishment in the infernal regions like Zion and Tantalus. And again, I would answer to myself, but all these things are fables. Or, if it be so, since the matter is in doubt, it is better to live obediently. But again, I would ponder within myself, how should I remain myself from the lust of sin, while uncertain as to the reward of righteousness, and all the more when I have no certainty what righteousness is, or what is pleasing to Yahuwah, and when I cannot ascertain whether the spirit be immortal, and be such that it has anything to hope for, nor do I know what the future is, certainly to be, yet still I cannot rest from thoughts of this sort." So, now his distress is along the lines of, do I need to live this life in a state of piety, hoping for the life to come, or do I enjoy the life I have now because it's the only one I'm going to have? So he's wondering about these different after-death type of destinations for mankind. So chapter 5, he says, "What then will I do? This will I do. I will proceed to Mitzrayim, or to Egypt, and there I will cultivate the friendship of the Hierophants, or Navaim, who will preside at the shrines. Then I will win over a magician by money, and entreat him by what they call the necromantic art, to bring me a spirit from the infernal regions, as if I were desirous of consulting it about some business. But this will be my consultation, whether the spirit is immortal. Now the proof that the spirit is immortal will be put past doubt, not from what it says, but from what I hear, but from what I see. For seeing it with my own eyes, I will ever after hold the surest conviction of its immortality, and no fallacy of words or uncertainty of hearing will ever be able to disturb the persuasion produced by sight. However, I related this project to a certain philosopher with whom I was intimate, who counseled me not to venture upon it, for, he said, if the spirit should not obey the call of the magician, you henceforth will
will live more hopelessly, as thinking that there is nothing after death, and also as having tried things unlawful. If, however, you seem to see anything, what obedience or what piety can arise to you from things unlawful and illicit? For if they say that the transactions of this sort are hateful to the Almighty, and that Elohim sets himself in opposition to those who trouble spirits after they release from the body, when I heard this I was indeed staggering in my purpose, yet I could not in any way either lay aside my longing or cast off the distressing thought. Okay, so Clement at this point, he hatches his plan. He's going to go down to Egypt, and he's going to pay a magician or a necromancer to bring up a spirit from the dead. And it's not that he wants to hear the report of whatever the spirit says, but just to confirm that there is, an immortal spirit. And in his mind, that'll tell him for sure whether there is life after death or not. And as his philosopher friend points out, well, this is unlawful for you to do. It's against the commands of the Almighty, and you'll basically be setting the Creator himself against you. And plus, you don't know if the spirit's even going to obey the call of the magician, so you may come away thinking there is no life after death. So next he moves on to chapter 6. He says, "Not to make a long story of it, while I was tossed upon these billows of my thought, a certain report, which took its rise in the regions of the east in the reign of Tiberius Caesar, gradually reached us, and gaining strength as it passed through every place, like some good message sent from Yahuwah, it was filling the whole world, and suffered not the divine will to be concealed in silence. For it was spread over all places, announcing that there was a certain person in Judea, who, beginning in the springtime, was preaching the kingdom of Yahuwah to the Yahudim, and saying that those should receive it who should observe the ordinances of his commandments and his doctrine, and that his speech might be believed to be worthy of credit and full of the Almighty. He was said to perform many mighty works and wonderful signs and prodigies by his mere word, so that, as one having power from Yahuwah, he made the deaf to hear, the blind to see, the lame to stand erect, and expelled every infirmity and all demons from men. Yea, that he even raised dead persons who were brought to him, and that he cured lepers also, looking at them from a distance, and that there was absolutely nothing that seemed impossible to him. These and such like things were confirmed in process of time, not now by frequent rumors, but by the plain statements of persons coming from those quarters, and day by day the truth of the matter was further disclosed." So he's hearing rumors about the ministry of Yeshua, and so this is, raising his curiosity, and he's beginning to think that maybe he might actually be able to find the answers to the questions he's looking for. Chapter 7 says, "At length meetings began to be held in various places in the city, and this subject to be discussed in conversation, and to be a matter of wonder who this might be who had appeared, and what message he had brought from Yahuwah to men. Until about the same year, a certain man, standing in a most crowded place in the city, made proclamation to the people, saying, 'Hear me, O you citizens of Rome. The Son of Yahuwah is now in the regions of Judea, promising ageless life to everyone who will hear him, but upon condition that he will regulate his actions according to the will of him by whom he has been sent, even of Yahuwah the Father. So turn from evil things to good, from things temporal to things ageless. Acknowledge that there is one El, ruler of heaven and earth, in whose righteous sight the unrighteous inhabit this world. But if you be converted and act according to his will, then coming to the world to come and being made immortal, you will enjoy his unspeakable blessings and rewards.' Now the man who spoke these things to the people was from the regions of the east, by tribe a Hebrew by the name of Josipa Barnabe." This, of course, is Barnabas, who said that he himself was one of his Talmudim, and that he was sent to this end, that he should declare these things to those who would hear them. When I heard these things, I began with the rest of the multitude to follow him, and to hear what he had to say. Truly I perceive that there was nothing of dialectic artifice in this man, but that he expounded with simplicity and without any craft of speech such things as he had heard from the son of Yahuwah, or had seen. For he did not confirm his assertions by the force of arguments, but produced from the people who stood round about him many witnesses of the sayings and marvels that he related. So, this is where he's first beginning to come into direct contact with some of the apostles of Yeshua. So he sees Barnabas. Now, notice here that it says that the message that Barnabas was teaching is that if you be converted and act according to his will, then you will enjoy his unspeakable blessings and rewards. So you see a different message than what you get from the writings of Paul. Here the message is that you are saved by your change of actions. You come to faith, and your faith produces actions, and it is through your obedience that you gain the favor of Elohim. I mentioned earlier that one thing in this, in the Nazarene Acts, is that there was it's almost like it's an anti-rhetorical type of document. It says, "For he did not confirm his assertions by the force of arguments, but he produced from the people who stood around about him many witnesses of sayings and marvels he related." So, Barnabas is not someone who's coming in with these very complicated rhetorical type of arguments, but he's using simplicity, no crafty speech. He's just coming in with honest truth. Chapter 8 says that now, inasmuch as the people began to assert willingly to the things that were sincerely spoken and to embrace the simple discourse, those who thought themselves learned or philosophic began to laugh at the man and flout him, and to throw out for him the grappling hooks of syllogisms, like strong arms. But he, unterrified regarding their subtleties and mere ravings, did not even judge him worthy of an answer, but boldly pursued the subject that he had set before him. So, you have these people who are, learned in the philosophic, and they began to try to trap him into these arguments, these same arguments that this document is talking against. It says, at length, someone having proposed this question to him as he was speaking, why a gnat has been so formed that though it is a small creature and has 6 feet, yet it has wings in addition, whereas an elephant, though it is an immense creature, has no wings, yet has only 4 feet. He, paying no attention to the question, went on with his discourse, which had been interrupted by the unseasonable challenge, only adding this admonition of every interruption: we have it in charge to declare to you the words and the wondrous works of him who sent us, and to confirm truth of what we speak, not by artfully devised arguments, but by witnesses produced from amongst yourselves. So again, the same theme keeps coming back to this anti-rhetorical method. For I recognize many standing in the midst of you, whom I remember to have heard along with us the things that we have heard, and too, having seen what we have seen, but be it in your opinion to receive or to spurn the tidings that we bring to you. For we cannot keep back what we know to be for your advantage, because if we be silent, woe is to us, but to you, if you receive not what we speak, destruction. I could indeed very easily answer your foolish challenges if you ask for the sake of learning truth. I mean, as to the difference of a gnat and an elephant. But now it were absurd to speak to you of these creatures when the very creator and framer of all things is unknown by you. So basically, Barnabas is just dismissing these silly arguments for what they are. They're just distractions. We'll move on to chapter 9. When he had spoken, all as with one consent, with rude voice, raised a shout of derision to put him to shame and to silence him, crying out that he was a barbarian and a madman. When I saw matters going on in this way, being filled I know not whence with a certain zeal, and inflamed with fervent enthusiasm, I could not keep silence, but cried out with all boldness, Most righteously does Almighty Yahuwah hide his will from you, whom he foresaw to be unworthy of the knowledge of himself, as is manifest to those who are really wise, from what you are now doing. For when you see that preachers of the will of Yahuwah have come amongst you, because their speech makes no show of knowledge or of the grammatical art, but in simple and unpolished language they set before you the divine commands, so that all who hear may be able to follow and to understand the things that are spoken, you deride the ministers and messengers of your salvation, not knowing that it is the condemnation of you who think yourselves skillful and eloquent, that rustic and barbarous men have the knowledge of truth, whereas when it has come to you, it is not even received as a guest. While if your intemperance and lust did not oppose, it ought to have been a citizen and a native. So, again, he's seeing that these people are ridiculing him and attacking the messenger. It's a ad hominem attack, and he's basically saying, that you think you're so skillful and elegant, but here I am with the truth, and you're not even accepting it. Thus you are convicted, right here, thus you are convicted of not being Havarim, or friends of truth, and philosophers, but followers of boasting and vain speakers. So, again, he's pointing out that they are they're not after truth. They're just after being able to endlessly debate things. You think that truth dwells not in simple but ingenious and subtle words, and produce countless thousands of words that are not to be rated at the worth of one word. What then do you think will become of you, all you crowd of Greeks, if there is to be, as he says, a judgment by Yahuwah? But now give over laughing at this man, to your own destruction, and let any one of you who pleases answer me. For indeed, by your barking you annoy the ears even of those who desire to be saved, and by your clamor you turn aside to the fall of infidelity the minds that are prepared for faith. What pardon can there be for you who deride and do violence to the messenger of truth when he offers to you the knowledge of Yahuwah? Whereas even if he brought you nothing of truth, yet even for the kindness of his intentions towards you, you ought to receive him with gratitude and welcome. So basically, what happens is that the crowd begins to lose patience with Barnabas, and Clement more or less comes to his rescue, and he rebukes the crowd for scorning this messenger of truth. So at this point, it says that while I was urging these and similar arguments, a great excitement was stirred up amongst the bystanders, some being moved with pity as toward a stranger, and approving my speech as in accordance with that feeling, others petulant and stolid, rousing the anger of their undisciplined minds as much against me as against Josipa Barnabe. But as the day was declining to evening, I laid hold of Josipa Barnabe by the right hand and led him away, although reluctantly, to my house, and there I made him remain, lest perchance any one of the rude rabble should lay hands upon him. While we were thus placed in contact for a few days, I gladly heard him discoursing the word of truth, yet he hastened his departure, saying that he must by all means celebrate at Judeju a feast of Yahuwah that was approaching, and that there he should remain in future with his countrymen and his brothers, evidently indicating that he was horrified at the wrong that had been done to him. So notice that this is not a Christian document. He's talking about going to Judea to celebrate one of the feasts. This is something that, if this was a Catholic document, that you wouldn't see, because the the church itself more or less believes that it is that these feasts and stuff are all done away with. So going on chapter 11, so basically, Barnabas is getting ready to leave. Clement takes him into his house. He kind of gets to know him, listens to his different discourses. But at this point, Barnabas is getting ready to leave. And so Clement says, "At length I said to him, only expound me the doctrines of that man who you say has appeared, and I will arrange your sayings in my language, and will practice the malchuth and righteousness of Almighty Yahuwah. And after that, if you wish, I will even sail along with you, for I am extremely desirous to see Judea, and it could be that I will remain with you always." To this he answered, "If indeed you wish to see our country, and learn those things that you desire, set sail with me even now. Or if there be anything that detains you now, I will leave with you directions to my dwelling, so that when you please to come to you may easily find me. For tomorrow I will set out on my journey." When I saw him determined, I went down with him to the harbor, and carefully took from him the directions that he gave me to find his dwelling. I told him that, but for the necessity of getting some money that was due to me, I should not at all delay, but I should speedily follow him. Having told him this, I commended him to the kindness of those who had charge of the ship, and returned sad, for I was possessed to the memory of the discourse that I had had with an excellent guest and a choice friend. So Barnabas is he's getting ready to go back to Judea. Clement is trying to talk him into staying, but Barnabas says he has to go back to celebrate this feast, and Barnabas is inviting him to go with him, but Clement's saying that I've got some business I need to attend to first, some loose ends to tie up more or less, and that then I will follow after you. So says, having then stopped for a few days, and having in some measure finished the business of collecting what was owed to me, for I had neglected many things through my desire of hastening, that I might not be hindered from my purpose, I set sail directly for Judea, and after 15 days landed at Caesarea Stratonus, which is the largest city in Israel. When I had landed and I was seeking for an inn, I learned from the conversation of the people that when Kefin, a most approved Talmud of him who appeared in Judea, and showed many signs and miracles divinely performed among men, was going to hold a discussion of words and questions the next day with one Shimon, a Shomroni, or Samaritans. Having heard this, I asked to be shown his lodging, and having found it, and standing before the door, I informed the doorkeeper who I was, and whence I came, and behold, Josipa Barnabe coming out. As soon as he saw me, he rushed into my arms, weeping for joy, and seizing me by the hand, led me into Kefin, having pointed him out to me at a distance. This, he said, is Kefin, of whom I spoke to you, as the greatest in the wisdom of Yahuwah, and whom also I have spoken constantly of you. Enter therefore as one well known to him, for he is well acquainted with all the good that is in you, and has carefully made himself aware of your obedient purpose, whence also he is greatly desirous to see you. Therefore I present you to him today as a great gift. At the same time presenting me, he said, "This, O Kefin, is Clement." So here you see he's arriving at Caesarea Stratonus, and he immediately more or less runs into Barnabas almost by divine providence, and he's introduced to Kefin. It says, "But Kefin most kindly, when he heard my name, immediately ran to me and kissed me. Then, having made me to sit down, he said, 'You did well to receive your guest, Josipa Barnabe, preacher of the truth, not fearing the rage of the insane people. You will be blessed, for as you have deemed an ambassador of the truth worthy of all honor, so the truth herself will receive you as a wanderer and a stranger, and will enroll you a citizen of her own city. And then there will be great joy to you, because imparting a small favor, you will be written heir of ageless blessings. Now therefore do not trouble yourself to explain your mind to me, For Josipa Barnabe has with faithful speech informed me of all things about you, and your dispositions almost daily, and without ceasing, recalling the memory of your good qualities, and to point out to you shortly, as a friend already of one mind with us, what is your best course? If there is nothing to hinder you, come along with us and hear the word of the truth, which we are now going to speak in every place until we come to the city of Rome. And now, if you wish anything, speak. So, Kefa's been told about Clement. Apparently, he made a really good impression with Barnabas, and Peter is saying, come along with us and hear the word of truth. And they said that they are going to speak it in every place until they come to Rome. So Peter is inviting Clement on this journey with them, and so Clement says to him, having detailed to him what purpose I had conceived from the beginning, and to how I had been distracted with vain inquiries, and to all those things that at first I intimated to you, my master Yaakov. So here you're seeing the purpose of this letter that we're reading is that this has actually being written to James, or Yaakov, the brother of Yeshua. And we get more details about this later, but essentially Clement becomes the scribe of Peter, and he is given this mission by James to write down everything that Peter says and to send it back to James on a regular basis, and then James is going to collect these teachings of Peter and the documentation of the travels of Peter. So that's what this is. This is one of the letters from Clement to James. It says, so that I need not repeat the same things now, I willingly agreed to travel with him, for that, said I, is just what I had been most eagerly desirous of. But first I should wish the scheme of truth to be expounded to me, that I may know whether the spirit is mortal or immortal, and if immortal, whether it is to be brought into judgment for those things that it does here. Further, I desire to know what that righteousness is, which is pleasing to Yahuwah. Then further, whether the world was created, and why it was created, and whether it is to be dissolved, and whether it is to be renovated and made better, or whether after this there will be no world at all. And not to mention everything, I should wish to be told what is the case with respect to these and such like things. To this Kefa answered, I will briefly impart to you the knowledge of these things, O Clement, therefore listen. Okay, so I think this is a good place to leave it off for today. Leave it on a bit of a cliffhanger, but this is essentially where this book really starts getting good. This is kind of just setting the stage about how Clement came to know Kefa, and from this point forward, we get to finally start getting into some of the teachings of Peter, and I think that if you stick with it, that you'll get a whole lot of questions answered, and we'll take it slow and go through this book and really try to get into some of the things that are being said. So I thank you for listening, and good night and shalom.